Okay, it seems like I have a lot of topics to cover, so I wrote it all down. I'm just gonna go ahead and read it off to you. Hey there, fellow YouTubers, this is Playthrough Archives making my debut. With this channel, I have one simple mission, and that is to play through historically the best games that have ever been released, starting from the very beginning. Now is the perfect time to get started because of the beginning of digital-only titles and games requiring permanent online connections. It has now become clear that games need to be purchased and experienced in the short window that it becomes released. If you missed out, then they will be gone for good. I've been wanting to do this for a while now, so I decided to play through games that I feel are not going to be around anymore, which is why I selected several points on the historical timeline of video games to start out from. You might have already guessed by now that for this reason alone I've decided not to start at the very beginning of game history, but instead I'll be starting from multiple points on the timeline in order to ensure that games which are about to become defunct have a chance at some play. I divided these starting points into 5 categories. 2 of these categories are of the utmost importance because they contain games that will not likely be around much longer and are also not likely to be revived through restoration efforts. I researched heavily into when console games were first made to play online for the most part, starting from the 6th generation, and then I painstakingly researched through every relevant game all the way to the 8th generation of video games, where online only was to become the norm. I have eliminated games that have worthwhile single-player campaigns, offline with bots, and games not requiring the internet to play. I also eliminated multiplayer games that have some form of connection through LAN play. And as such, the first category I will start from is going to begin with the 6th and 7th generation games that are multiplayer or online only, which there are only a handful after applying my strict guidelines just mentioned before. This will then continue on to MMOs that I feel are important and need of immediate play. The MMOs in this first category are going to be a quarter of the way into the timeline of MMO games. And the reason for this is because through restoration efforts, actually many MMOs have been made available to play, of the early MMOs. For a second category, I'm going to jump ahead to the beginning of the 8th generation of video games, because with the advent of digital only, it is now required that I keep up with the times, so to speak, in order to make sure that I am able to even play these games at all. The next 3 categories won't have the need of such urgency as the first 2, so I'll continue working on these, but much more slowly. The third category will include non-online RPG games starting from the 1st generation. The 4th category will be all other types of games from the 1st generation except the RPG games, because they get to have their own category since they're so huge. The last category will start off with the very first adventure and text games that kickstarted online text adventures, and I will then move to MUDs, or multi-user dungeons. Furthermore, I will then proceed to play the first MMOs until it all runs back together into the first category of later MMOs. Reasons I'm doing this are for historical representation, allowing others to view and at least experience games that have no restorative value, no future after, I guess, server death, if you'd want to call it that. And lastly, I guess this is one of my personal bucket lists in life as well. The goal of every game is going to mostly be completion of story, even if that means easy mode will sometimes be used. It's just a general playthrough and overall experience. Some games will be more challenging than others, and sometimes hard mode, if I'm up to a challenge, will be necessary. But it all depends and will vary with the game being played. As for the different categories and sheer volume of games, I may need to distribute all these into multiple YouTube channels, and more info will be provided later if that is the case. After saying all this, I hope you enjoy.